All right, it's been a while, but we're back with a design doc discussion where we take a look at video from a design doc and discuss it live while watching it. So, today we're taking a look at good design, bad design, the best and worst graphic design in games. And, well, I'm assuming that he's mostly going to talk about UI, but we'll see if he mentions anything else.
So, last month, Persona 5 pretty much consumed my life. And if I had just one takeaway, it would be that it has the slickest UI I've ever seen.
You never see it coming. You see that my mind is too fast for right.
My God! It's so dynamic, so smooth, so stylish. It's gorgeous. The character is just running through the victory screen. That is so cool.
Yeah, the thing about this game, I mean, it's known and it's renowned for this specifically because it's honestly amazing. And the thing is, when you take a look at the screens he shows, is every single transition has an animation. It's not just, fade to black or like thing. It has like a special animation with it, right? Have the guy moving his hand with the thing moving on the screen until the middle. Right, when he switches, you have the animation of the character behind it. Here the same.
My
like everything
God.
has its own animation, and it's just
so dynamic, so smooth, so stylish. It's gorgeous. The character. Sorry. So, in honor of Persona 5, I just want to talk about some graphic design. To put it broadly, graphic design is visual communication. Applied to games, it's your menus, UI, camera work, color choice, font choice, animation, character design, your presentation of information. There's a lot of overlap between graphic design and art, but graphic design is about more than aesthetics.
I mean, the way that I would say it's art is how you present your game world, right? It's the graphical style that you choose for the game world itself, and graphic design, for me, would be the rest, everything else, basically. Like I say, like the fonts, like the transitions, the menus, all of that thing. Not just the UI, but also
good graphic design in a game is like a good translator, where it seamlessly and stylishly communicates to its players and makes immersing yourself in a game a little bit easier. Bad graphic design is like a bad translation, an obstacle, making it more of a chore to get into and taking some of the shine off a game.
Yeah, that is the thing. I guess in this, went a little bit too far. Yeah, well, in this example, in the example a couple seconds earlier.
Get into and take.
The thing about this is a lot of people pay too little attention to main menus. And the thing about these main menus, like, yeah, you have the character there, but it's nothing new. It's completely bland. It's just the menu itself, image of your character, like, background with a fade. That's basically it. Like, it has nothing.
Taking some of the shine off a game.
And that's kind of
I'm going to highlight
example.
some great and, well, terrible graphic design in games. But before we dive in, here are some rules. These examples are chosen based on a combination of style and practicality in their design.
Okay, so this is the thing. Obviously, there is these 2 points of it. One of the things, the UI should be very, very useful. As useful as possible. You shouldn't have more information that you need. You shouldn't have less information that you might need. And it shouldn't clutter your whole thing. It should, right? There's like many things that I have to take into account when using a UI. It has to be easy to use, easy to understand, etc. But at the same time, if you can add, like in Persona in this example, which is I guess the best example that we know, kind of, is that if you also manage to fit it with the same style that your game is in, then you're going to make it a lot more enjoyable, a lot more. It's going to fit your game and your whole. We're going to make the whole experience a ton better.
These aren't ranked, since
so it's good that he makes a distinction.
Trying to decide what is the best graphic design is, well, impossible. Unless it's Persona 5. If there's an example that you are fond of.
So I haven't played Persona 5, so I wouldn't be able to tell you how usable the UI is, how good the usability is, but like graphically, it's the perfect match with the game aesthetic, the game theme, and so on. It's incredible. It's very, very
that
good.
doesn't make it here, post it in the comments. I'll probably do another one of these, so it may show up there. Anyway, first up, a masterclass in communicating game mechanics through visuals. Good design. One of the biggest challenges in many stealth games is a lack of clarity. Too often, whether you can be seen or heard by an enemy is a mystery. It can lead to some frustrating trial and error gameplay. A good stealth game is like a good puzzle game. They work best when you can see all the pieces in front of you, just waiting to be solved. Mark of the Ninja is a game with some very intuitive UI and visual cues to tell the player everything they need to know so they can confidently plan out their moves. In Mark of the Ninja, visibility is treated as a binary system. You are either hidden in shadow or exposed in light. Characters and objects in shadow are nicely defined by white outlines and are fully colored when they're in the light. Even your own visibility is smartly indicated by subtle changes in lighting and blurring effects. Any area blocked by a wall is darker until it's within the player's point of view. Any rooms that you are adjacent to are blurred, and clear up as you peek through vents and doors. Sound in Mark of the Ninja is just as clear cut. As you make noise, the range of each sound is represented by a ring. The ring's size is dependent on the sound itself. Running will produce medium-sized rings, and louder actions like breaking objects will make larger rings. Every one of your tools is laid out in your HUD. They are also conveyed through icons on objects in the environment like bells or pots. These help make your tools easy to use.
But this is the thing, like, could you have made these UI, when I mean UI, I mean the actual, the abilities plus the score and stuff, could they have made it slightly more fitting in the style? Maybe. Honestly, potentially, right? You're supposed to be a ninja, I don't know, you could make it maybe look a little bit more like a scroll or something. I don't know. Obviously, I'm not going to figure it out myself right here, but maybe that doesn't mean he is, in this case, mostly talking about the usability in the sense that you can know exactly how your actions are going to affect stuff.
Which lets you focus on solving the puzzle, rather than being caught up in the game's mechanics. It may not make the game more immersive, or even that much more stylish, but Mark of the Ninja's UI is super practical and makes playing the game feel like second nature.
Bad design.
Now, bad graphic design doesn't make a bad game. Smash 4 is great, but the menus, not so much. Smash 4's main menu represents the thin line between success and failure in graphic design. On first glance, it looks fine, like a more colorful version of the menus from Super Smash Bros. Brawl. But as you start clicking around, you'll notice a problem. The organization of the menu is strange, which makes navigating the menus feel clunky. The menu elements have an inconsistent look, and aside from the giant smash button, there's a serious lack of visual hierarchy. The objects in the menu aren't arranged by their importance. The multiplayer is the most prominent option here, as it should be, but the other options are all fighting for your attention. The biggest offender in Smash 4's menu is right here. Games and More. That's the vaguest title ever. That's like naming the button, here's some more stuff, I don't know. Now, Brawl and Melee had their priorities straight. You had single...
But for example, talking about theming and properly using like the Smash UI in general, it's very, very good. Because it has a very distinct theme. You see the UI, and at a glance you know it's Smash.
Player versus online Vault.
Even if they give you just the outline without the colors, you can tell it's Smash, right? When you look at, for example, the one about Jak and Daxter. Was it Jak and Daxter? I'm not exactly sure. But if you saw that UI, it was so simple that it could be any game. Like, if you don't have the actual characters right there, you put some other character for another game, and that's basically you do it. Like, it doesn't have any personality.
Options and data. There you go. The essential categories are nice and organized. But in Smash 4, single player, vault, and options are all shoved into games and more. Other menu items are thrown around at random. Why is Trophy Rush, a single player minigame, not in the stadium option with the other minigames? Why is Challenges not placed in vault or single player? Why do custom moves have to be set in a separate menu and not just on the character select screen? Why is Smash Tour anywhere? Smash 4's UI issues don't stop there. The UI in Smash Tour is chaotic and overly flashy, to the point that it makes the game harder to play. Smash 4's sloppy design is especially strange. The designer worked on Kirby's Air Ride and the last two Smash Bros. Games, none of which have these problems. But with the way
it does seem, I don't know, maybe it's a translation thing? Like, I don't think so, but it does seem very, very weird how things are set.
The menu is now,
set up here.
It makes finding stuff a total pain until you just memorize it. Good design.
Yeah, like it forces you to actually explore the menu in order to know where everything is, which is not the point of the menu. Of a menu, I think, in general.
Brutal Legend is a game I desperately want to love, but I only like. It's one of those games that seems to be going one way, but then it becomes something else entirely, and it's just kind of eh. Despite that, Brutal Legend has 3 really cool things going for it. 1. The main character is just Jack Black being himself, and that's usually a good time. Decapitation! 2. Exploring the open world and seeing Double Fine's vision of a crazy heavy metal fantasy world is amazing. And 3. The UI absolutely nails its theme.
Yeah, it fits
Designed
the
by
theme.
Joe Kowalski, Brutal Legend's graphic design proudly wears its inspirations on its sleeve. The type, especially on the headers, is very similar to the bold, angular, and gothic typefaces of logos from iconic metal bands like Iron Maiden, Def Leppard, Motorhead,
Although still readable, because sometimes like metal bands are not very readable.
and Black Sabbath. The in-game encyclopedia is presented in a high schooler's notebook. The start of every mission is the cover art of a worn-out album. Every UI element, tutorial, and even certain cutscenes use a distinct illustration style inspired by medieval and Norse woodcuts, which mesh extremely well with the heavy metal fantasy. The interface also has high contrast with the black and white standing out nicely from the colorful landscapes. I love Brutal Legend's UI in general, but the real standout here is the main menu.
You sure you're ready for this? Because what I hold in my hand is not just gonna blow your mind, it's gonna blow your soul.
The main menu is an interactive FMV that goes through a custom-made gatefold album of the game itself. Every option is on a different part of the album.
Great.
New
It might be a little bit too much depending on how long it takes and how long it takes for one thing to go to another and so on. It might become a little bit old, but this is
game
actually
and continue
such
are
a
in
great
the
idea.
inside cover. Chapter select is found in the back where you'd find the track list. Multiplayer is in the
that
record's
makes-
sleeve, and options and extras are the record's A and B sides respectively. This menu oozes
And it just literally Jack Black like,
creativity,
doing it.
and it also
That
makes
is
a
great.
few smart decisions to keep the theme from getting in the way of this menu's usability. In the raw footage, the type isn't actually on the album itself. It was edited in post to allow it to be made in different languages, and the footage
yeah, of
is
course.
sped up to keep navigation from feeling too sluggish. There is a great behind the scenes video which I'll link below that shows the designer working on the UI of the game. It goes over some of the design and editing challenges, like matching different takes, or adding out little mistakes. It's great if you're interested in video editing. Overall, Brutal Legend
But it is funny how it's made. It's just like a set of videos like matched together.
menu is
in
one
a
of the
way.
more creative uses of
great,
FMV
though.
that
It's
I've
great.
ever seen in
And that's the other thing he talks about how I think, but like here, for example, the new game has been laid out on top so that you can also have like a glow effect under it, which obviously if you just cut it out wouldn't work.
Overall, Brutal Legend's
like,
menu is
interesting. I
one
might
of the
check
more
out the
creative
video
uses of
later as well.
FMV that I've ever seen in a game.
And I'm assuming also that the game's story is actually related to actually jumping into that record, that those songs or whatever, or being transported by listening to it. Like the story, I'm assuming the story actually makes sense with it being like in person in a way. So that is actually very nice.
Bad.
But again, although the usability is probably fine, here the big important part is the visual, the theming of it, and not necessarily the usability.
Design. Let's just get right to it. Mario Party 8 is a total eyesore in its menu and UI design. It's functional, barely, but this presentation is just really poor. Here's a weird thing. The main menu is at a 16:9 aspect ratio, but the game itself is shown at a 4:3
this
ratio.
is just stupid.
It's jarring and unnecessary.
Yeah, that's
The
just
typography here is some of the worst I've ever seen. The type in the main menu items are off-center. The kerning, the spacing between individual letters, is uneven in spots. But the biggest issue here is the dump truck of different typographic styles in the menus. Most designers would recommend keeping your different font choices and styles down to about 2 or 3 at a time.
Sure. But what you can do is make sure that you always use them for the same type of things, kind of. Because if you look at big games, right, you have tons of fonts. At the end of the day, you have like tons of fonts. But as long as you always have the same, if you have your score is always in the same font, and whenever you gain score, whenever you lose score, that's always in the same font. Your damage is in the same font, As long as you keep it consistent, it's fine.
The main menu alone has up to 5 different fonts and type treatments.
That's not necessarily bad, because in a way, play choices is the title, right? And then here, this and the bottom one, oh well, those two are different as well. But this is kind of like a little prompt, I guess. Then these are the buttons. Yeah, fair enough. I mean, you could probably do with slightly less, but it's not
Here,
that bad.
here, and here. This
It's not that
isn't
bad.
even the worst example of this in this game. Mario Party 8's typography inconsistently switches between using multiple outlines, drop shadows, and gradients for contrast. Like fonts, it's a good idea to use these effects sparingly on text, but instead,
Well, I would say that having an outline on text is usually a good practice.
the game likes to use all 3 of these effects at once. Look at the text that appears at the start of someone's turn. The font here has 2 outlines, one of which has an ugly golden gradient, and there's also a drop shadow in between this line and the red fill.
Like, honestly, I feel like he's being picky here. I don't necessarily consider this to be too bad. I mean, it maybe not the best style, but it's fine. It's Luigi's turn. It's readable. It's not a big deal.
This is a typographic nightmare. There's
he's
no
exaggerating a little
cohesiveness
bit, man.
between modes either.
That
The
fair.
menus,
I agree with
board
it.
game screen, mini game screen, and the results screen all have something unique and terrible in their type. It's just all over the place.
That might be the fact that they have too many. That I would agree. It may be like a little bit all over the place. Like everything has its own font, right? Completely unuseful, unnecessary. But yeah, well, the
Good
Luigi thing
design.
was not that bad.
I can't say I'm really into the Dead Space series because I'm what some might call
I mean, but I don't know what he was gonna say. But what I'm gonna say, like the thing about Dead Space is basically I personally love diegetic stuff in games in general. Like not necessarily UI. In the case of Dead Space, obviously it's a UI, which is great. But even for other games, like for example in Fallout, I love the soundtrack. So the background soundtrack that you have is very subtle. But then unless it's like specific important moments, it's very subtle. But then what you tend to listen to the most is the radio. It's just random radio scattered around the world, and it's actually very well made into how many of those are scattered, so that you most of the time are probably hearing a radio. And then obviously you have the Pit Boy, which you can also, listen to, which is still diegetic in a way, because it's like semi-diegetic in a way, because it's, it's background music straight up, into your ears, I guess. But it's technically coming from the Beat Boy, so it's fine. But yeah, obviously, even games like this game, like Dead Space, or even Halo with bullets and mount and stuff like that, it's great. I love having UIs.
A
diegetic in the
big
games,
man
which is
baby
awesome.
coward, but Dead Space has some nice UI. It's almost like a direct evolution of Metroid Prime's Helmet HUD, where the UI actually exists in the world.
And this is the thing. This is a small thing because this is technically just UI, right? They added a little bit
This
movement
technique-
to it. Potentially, let me check.
But Dead
again.
Space has some nice UI. It's almost like a direct evolution
see
of
again.
Metroid Prime's Helmet HUD.
So yeah, you can see it still moves a little bit. It's a little bit like the UI in Fallout when you're inside a power armor, right? It is technically UI, right? It's nothing but UI, but the fact that it's themed and it's added that little bit of movement, because it's not actually in the world, in the game world whatsoever. It's just the UI added to your screen, but it makes it looks like it is, and that adds so much immersion to it, which is awesome.
HUD, where the UI actually exists in the world. This technique is called diegetic UI. In Dead Space, your character's equipment is the interface.
But in Dead Space, for example, it is actually in the world. It is actually things in the back of your exosuit, I guess, which show you how much health you have and so
The
on.
rig system displays your health on the spine of your character with a distinct neon color that changes as your health changes. The rig holographic menus themselves are beautifully laid out, organized, and intuitive with clean and easy to read type.
And this is the same. This kind of goes slightly more towards what the other example he gave, which is it is just UI, but the fact that it's themed as if it is like a hologram, it makes it slightly more immersive in a way.
Typography and typesetting. The neon blue is a strong contrast against the rusty and unsaturated oranges, yellows,
course you want
browns,
to,
and grays that are common
be
in
able to
Dead
see it.
Space's palette. I also appreciate that because the UI is physically in front of the character, it makes sense that the game doesn't pause when you dig through menus, which was a pretty rare idea at the time. The
Especially
holographic
for-
design
well,
is also applied to your weapons, with your
it's a
ammo
great
count
thing for a
placed
horror
right
game.
next to your crosshair, and dotted lines and shapes appear to explain the dismemberment mechanic. The ideas here might seem simple, and visually it might even be a bit plain, but the way Dead Space makes a seamless and useful UI blend into its world is nothing short of masterful.
Yeah, it's very well made.
Bad design.
Like, I don't know if I'm gonna talk to it, but another game that I like the UI of is Red Dead Redemption 2 specifically. And what I like about that game is that you have proper UI, right? You have UI, which is just UI, and it's usually very simple. But what I like, it's very subtle, and also the fact that it's simply once you're not doing anything, it disappears. And I think it's great. I think it's very, very well made.
For a
So
fun-
even though someone decided that they needed to force an actual UI, like in this game, I would say, they made it so that it's very subtle and that you can still do without most of the time.
final bad UI entry, screw it. I'm just gonna go back to Mario Party 8 because, wow, this is just all over the place. And I mean that literally. Nothing really follows a clear grid structure, which is one of the keys to good UI design. Every element here is misaligned or haphazardly placed. Most of the submenus are weirdly framed with these checkered backgrounds. The menu elements don't use this framing at all, overlapping the border.
Although that is kind of true though. Like you have the background image, which is like a top thing with like a line here, like a bottom thing with a line thing. It would make sense if the line would stop before the menu and would, end right after the menu instead of just being there. I guess it's just an image. It doesn't align with us, that is true. That makes no
Menu
much
headers
sense.
have this strange ornamental design that doesn't really relate to any of the other elements. I guess it's supposed to go with the carnival theme, but it's not effective. On top of that, we have this faded black bar with instructions at the center. Character portraits are compressed and awkwardly cropped. And there are a ton of different button shapes and formats throughout the menus with no good rhyme or reason. I'm sure some of you are asking, what's the big deal?
Yeah,
They're just menus and interfaces. They
like
don't
it's not like what's the big deal? Like I understand that it's not very well made, but I feel like in some you're
really matter once you
exaggerating
get
a
used to
little
them. And you're not wrong. It's easy to ignore a bad menu. Most of the time. Even great menus like the ones in Persona 5 occasionally have the same issues as Mario Party. I mean, you gotta admit,
Yeah, exactly. That's what I mean. I don't necessarily think that having a lots of funds is necessarily wrong.
Persona 5's menus are pretty busy.
Yeah, and you have also tons of different funds all the time.
An interface or menu is like a bridge. A well-structured one gets you to your destination with no problem. A rickety one can get you there too, but you'll feel worse about it. I've mentioned a few basic rules, but a UI doesn't have to follow all of them. You need to be careful though. Each rule that a design skips increases the risk of the design totally falling apart. Persona 5 breaks a few of these rules in service of its overarching theme. Mario Party breaks them for no reason.
So this is kind of what I mean, is that Persona 5 might not be the best usable UI, the most usable UI, but it is the most incredible theming, I say.
Real benefits. A UI designer needs to understand the rules and why they exist if they want to break the rules effectively.
Yeah, seems like a good rule for most things. Yeah, I mean, yeah, I agree with most things. Yeah, and interesting, good UI is something that is usually overlooked, and more than anything, a good main menu is usually overlooked. Like, if you play any, honestly, I would say 90% of indie games and smaller titles, their main menu is extremely simple. It's usually a column of words, a column of buttons, and an image, right? An image which is going to be decorated, right? You're going to have the title, you're going to have like a main character on the side or whatever. But that's going to be it for most small games. And I personally think that's wrong, that people should spend a lot more time on the main menus, or at least think about them a little bit more. The same way, and this is something I always say, because the main reason for it is simply that the main menu and the main menu music, which is what I wanted to go to, is the first thing you see when you open a game. It's your first impression of the game. If you get into the game and you have a shitty music and a shitty menu, you're already going to have a little apprehensions about the game. If you have suddenly like a great menu, extremely well themed, that fits the game perfectly, with a great soundtrack, you'll get hooked. You'll be like, wow, okay, I'm getting into it, right? And this is like with the music, this is an example I tend to say, because when you talk to people about game music and stuff, you realize that the song they recognize the most is always the main menu. Well, I wouldn't say always, but most of the time it's the main menu, right? Everyone knows the start of the main menu music of Skyrim, of the Oblivion, of all games, really much. Like, you start the music of the main menu, it's like, I know what one it is, right? You know which game it is just by the start of it, because you've listened to it a lot of the time, and it's what stays with you. So if it's bad, it's still gonna stay with you, which is not a great thing. So anyways, yeah. I mean, other takeouts from this is also, well, for me, the important things are try to theme the things I usually not done as much as I would like, is try to theme your menu and your UI more. Like, a lot of times the UIs tend to be too simple and too straightforward, to the point. It's like, oh, you have an ability, so you just have an ability bar. But, like, I don't know, make it a little bit more themed towards what your game is about. Other things is, like, for me, I would recommend trying to have some kind of outline of some kind of thing on your fonts most of the times. I mean, it helps people read, most like people like dyslexic people and so on. Like, it definitely helps them a lot read when things have contrast, and and an outline is a very easy way to do that. And it also helps that if your font is white, let's say, or any color, if you have an outline, it doesn't really matter what is happening in behind of it. That is still going to be readable, right? And honestly, as long and that's the thing, because as long as either the outline or the color inside is visible, the font is going to be readable, so it's fine. So anyway, that's kind of it. Yeah, it's a good video. It's a good video. Again, he didn't talk about anything specific, more like good bad designs, which is interesting video nonetheless. Learn from others. Always do that. It's a great practice, of course. So anyways, yeah, thanks for watching. That was it, and see you next time. Bye bye.